Hey everybody, welcome. I'm now going to read everyone chapter 11 of Lord of the Flies. This chapter is called Castle Rock. In the short chill of dawn, the four boys gathered around the small smudge where the fire had been, while Ralph knelt and blew. Gray feathery ashers scurried hither and thither as the breath, but no spark shone among them. The twins watched anxiously, and Piggy sat expressionless between the luminous wall of the myopia. Ralph continued to blow his ears that were singing with effort, but then the first breeze of dawn took the job off his hands and blinded him with ashes. He squatted back, he swore, and rubbed water out of his eyes. No use. Eric looked down at him through a mask of dried blood, and Piggy peered in the general direction of Ralph. Of course it's no use, Ralph. Well, we got no fire. Ralph brought his face within a couple of feet of Piggy's. Can you see me? A bit. Ralph allowed the swollen flap of his cheeks to close his eye again. They've got our fire. Rage shrilled his voice. They stole it! Well, that's them! They blinded me, see? That's Jack Meridew! You call an assembly, Ralph. We gotta decide what to do. What, an assembly for only us? It's all we got, Sam. Let me hold on to you. They went forward the platform. Blow the conch! Blow as loud as you can! Maybe they'll come. The forest re-echoed and the birds lifted, crying out of the treetops as that first morning ages ago. Both ways the beach was deserted. Some little ones came from the shelters, and Ralph sat down on the polished trunk, and the three others stood before him. He nodded, and Thematic sat down on the right. Ralph pushed the conch into Piggy's hand. He held the shining thing carefully and blinked at Ralph. Go on, then. I'll just take the conch to say this. I can't see no more, and I've just got to take the conch to say this. I can't see no more, and I got to get my glasses back. Awful things has been done on this island. I voted for you for chief. He's the only one who ever got anything done. So now you speak, Ralph, and you tell us what, or else. Piggy broke off, sniveling, and Ralph took back the conch as he sat down. Just an ordinary fire. You think we could do that, wouldn't you? Just a smoke signal so we could be rescued? Are we savages or what? Only now there's no signal going up. Ships may be passing. Do you remember how he went hunting for that fire, went out, and the ship passed by? And they all think he's best as chief? Then that's his fault too. If it hadn't been for him, it wouldn't have happened. Now Piggy can't see, and they came stealing. Ralph's voice ran up. At night in darkness, and they stole our fire. They stole it! We'd have given them fire if they'd asked, but they stole it, and the signal's out, and we can't even be rescued. Don't you see what I mean? We'd given them fire for themselves, only they had to steal it. He paused lamely as the curtain flickered in his brain. Piggy held out his hands for the conch. What are you going to do, Ralph? This is just talk without deciding. I want my glasses back. I'm trying to think. Supposing we go looking like we used to, washed and our hair brushed. After all, we aren't savages really, and being rescued isn't a game. He opened the flap of his cheeks and looked at the twins. We could smarten up a bit and then go. We ought to take spears, said Sam. Even Piggy. Because we need them. You haven't got the conch. Piggy held up the conch to show him. You can't take spears if you want, but I shan't. You can take them if you want, but I shan't. What's the good? I'll have to live like a dog anyhow. Yes, laugh, go on, laugh. There's them on the island as that would laugh at anything. And what happened? What's grown-ups going to think? Young Simon was murdered, and there was that other kid with the mark of the fight on his face. Who's seen him since we first come up here? Piggy, stop a minute. I got the conch. I'm going to that Jack Meridew, and I'm going to tell him, and I'm going to get my glasses back. You're going to get hurt, Piggy. What can he do more than he already has? I'll tell him what's what. You tell me carry the conch, Ralph. I'll show him the one thing he hasn't got. Piggy paused for a moment and peered around the dim figures. The shape of the old assembly trod in the grass to listen to him. I'm going to him with this conch in my hands. I'm going to hold it out. Look, I'm going to say, you're stronger than I am, and you haven't got asthma. You can see, I'm going to say, and with both eyes. But I don't ask for my glasses back, not as a favor. I don't ask you to be a sport, I'll say. Not because you're strong, but because that's what's right. So give me my glasses, I'm going to say. You've got to give them back. Piggy ended, flushed and trembling. He pushed his conch quickly into Ralph's hand as though in a hurry to get rid of it and wiped the tears from his eyes. The green light was gentle about them, and the conch lay at Ralph's feet, fragile and white. A single drop of water that had escaped Piggy's fingers now flashed on a delicate curve like a star. At last, Ralph sat up straight and drew back his hair. All right, you can try if you like. We'll go with you. He'll be painted, said Sam timidly. You know how he'll be. He won't think much of us. If he gets waxy, we've had it. Ralph scowled at Sam. Dimly, he remembered something Simon had said to him once by the rocks. Don't be silly, he said. And then he added quickly, let's go. He held out the conch to Piggy, who was flushed this time with pride. You've got to be the one to carry it. When we're ready, I'll carry it. Piggy sought in his mind for words to convey his passionate willingness to carry the conch against all odds. I don't mind. I'll be glad to carry it, Ralph. Only I'll have to be led. Obviously, I don't have my glasses. Ralph put the conch back in the shining log. We better eat and then get ready. They made their way to the devastating fruit trees. Piggy was helped to his food and found some bud to touch. While they ate, Ralph thought of the afternoon. We'll be like we were. We'll wash. Sam gulped down a mouthful and protested. But we bathe every day. Ralph looked at the filthy objects before him and sighed. We ought to comb our hair, only it's too long. I've got both socks left in the shelter, said Eric. So we put them over our heads like caps, sort of. We could find some stuff, said Piggy, and tie your hair back. Like a girl? Well, no, not like that, of course not. Then we must go as we are, said Ralph, and they won't be any better. Eric made a detaining gesture. But they'll be painted. You know how it is. The others nodded. They understood only too well the liberation into savagery. That the concealing paint brought all the boys who wore it. Well, we won't be painted, Ralph said, because we are not savages like them. Snare at that moment looked at each other. All the same, Ralph shouted, there will be no paint. He tried to remember. Smoke, he said. We want smoke. He turned on the twins fiercely. I said smoke. We've got to have smoke. There was a silence except for the multitudinous murmur of the bees, and at last Piggy spoke kindly. Of course we have, because the smoke's a signal, and we can't be rescued if we don't have smoke. I knew that, shouted Ralph. He pulled his arm away from Piggy. Are you suggesting? I'm just saying what you always says, said Piggy hastily. I thought for a moment. I hadn't, said Ralph loudly. I knew it all the time. I hadn't forgotten that. Piggy nodded propitiatingly. You're chief, Ralph. You remember everything. Yes, I hadn't forgotten, Piggy. Of course not. The twins were examining Ralph curiously, as though they were seeing him for the first time. They set off along the beach in formation, and Ralph went first, limping a little, his spear carried over one shoulder. He saw things partially through the tremble of the heat haze over the flashing sands and his own hair and injuries. Behind him came the twins, worried now for a while, but full of unquenchable vitality. They said little, but trailed their butts of the wooden spears, for Piggy had found that by looking down the shielding his tired sight from the sun, he could see these moving along the sand. He walked between the trailing butts, therefore the conch had carefully held before his two hands. The boys made a compact little group and moved over the beach like plate-like shadows dancing and mingling beneath them. There was no sign left on the storm, and the beach was swept clean like a blade that had been scored. The sky and the mountain were at an immense distance, shimmering in the heat, and the reef was lifted by a mirage, floating in a kind of silver pool halfway up in the sky. They passed the place where the tribe had danced. The charred sticks lay on the rocks, and the rain had quenched them, but the sand by the water was smooth again. They passed this in silence. No one doubted that the tribe would be found at the Castle Rock, and when they came in sight of it, they stopped with one accord. The densest tangle of the island, a mass of twistiest stems, black and green and impenetrable, lay on the left, and tall grass swayed before them. So now Ralph went forward. Here was the crushed grass where they had all lain when he was gone to prospect. There was the neck of the land, the ledge skirting of the rock, up there with the red pinnacles. Sam touched his arm. Smoke! There was a shiny smudge of smoke wavering into the air on the other side of the rock. Some fire, I don't think... Ralph turned. What are we hiding for? He stepped back through the screen of the grass to the little space that led to the narrow neck. You two follow behind. I'll go first, then Piggy pace behind me. Keep your spears ready, though. Piggy peered anxiously into the luminous veil that hung between him and the world. Is it safe? Ain't there a cliff or something I can hear the sea? You keep right close to me, okay, Piggy? Ralph moved forward on the neck. He kicked a stone and it bounced into the water. Then the sea struck down, revealing a red, weedy weir 40 foot beneath Ralph's left arm. Am I safe? Quavered Piggy. I feel awful. High above them, the pinnacles came a sudden shout, and then an imitation war cry was answered by a dozen voices from behind the rock. Give me the conch and stay still. Halt! Who goes there? Ralph bent his neck and glimpsed suddenly at Roger's dark face at the top. You can see who I am, he shouted. Now stop being silly. He put the conch to his lips and began to blow. Savages appeared all over suddenly. They were painted out of recognition, edging around the ledge towards the neck. They carried spears and disposed themselves to defend the entrance. Ralph went to blowing and ignored Piggy's terrors. Roger was shouting, You mind out, see? At length, Ralph took his lips away and paused to get his breath back. His words first were gasped, but they were audible. I'm calling an assembly. The savage guarding the neck muttered to themselves, but made no motion. Ralph walked forward a couple of steps. A voice whispered urgently behind them. Don't leave me, Ralph. Just kneel down, said Ralph sideways, and wait till I come back. He stood halfway along the neck and gazed at the savages intently. Freed by the paint, they had tied their hair back and were more comfortable than he was. Ralph made a resolution to tie his own back afterwards. Indeed, he felt like telling them to wait and doing it there and then, but that was impossible. The savage sniggered a bit, and one gestured at Ralph with his spear. High above, Ralph took his hands off the lever and leaned out to see what was going on. The boys on the neck stood in a pool of their own shadow, diminished to shagging heads. Piggy crouched, his back shapeless as a sack. I am calling for an assembly. There was silence. Roger stood up, a small stone that flung between the twins, aiming to miss. They started, and Sam was just kept his footing. Some sources of power began to pulse in Roger's body. Ralph spoke again loudly. I am calling for an assembly. He ran his eyes over them. Where is Jack? The group of boys stirred and consulted. A painted face spoke with the voice of the Robert. He's hunting, and he said we weren't to let you in. I've come to see about the fire and about Piggy's specs. The group in front of them shifted, and laughter shivered outward among them, light, excited laughter that went echoing through the tall rocks. A voice spoke from behind Ralph. What do you want? The twins made a bolt past Ralph and got between him and the entry. He turned quickly, and Jack, identifiable by personality and his red hair, was advancing through the forest. A hunter crouched on either side. All three of them were masked in black and green. Behind them on the grass, the headless and paunched body of a sow lay where he had dropped it. Piggy wailed, Ralph, don't leave me! With ludicrous care, he embraced the rock, pressing himself to it in the sucking sea. The sneering of the savages came a loud, derisive jeer. Jack shouted above the noise. You go away, Ralph. You keep to your end. This is my end, and this is my tribe. Now you leave us alone now. The jeering died away. You stole Piggy's specs, said Ralph breathlessly. You got to give them back to us. I got to, huh? Who says I got to? Ralph tremored, blazed out. I said, you voted for me as chief. Didn't you hear the conch? You played a dirty trick. We'd have given you fire if you just asked for it, but no, you had to steal it. The blood was flowing from his cheeks and the bunged-up eyes throbbed. You could have had fire whenever you wanted, but you didn't. You came sneaking up like a thief and you stole Piggy's glasses. Say that again to me. You're a thief! Thief! Piggy screamed. Ralph, mind me! Jack made a rush, and he stabbed at Ralph's chest with a spear. Ralph sensed the position of the weapon from the glimpse he caught of Jack's arm, and he put the thrust aside with his own butt. Then he brought the end around and caught Jack a stinger across the ear. They were chest to chest, breathing fiercely, pushing and flaring. Who's the thief now? You are! Jack wrenched free and swung at Ralph with his spear. By common consent, they were using the spears as sabers now, no longer daring the lethal points. The blows struck, and Ralph's spear slid down to fall agonizingly on his fingers. Then they were apart once more, their positions reversed, and Jack towards the castle rock and Ralph on the outside towards the island. Both boys were breathing very heavily. Come on, then! Come on! Truculently, they squared up to each other, but they just kept on their fighting distance. You come on and see what you get! You come on! Ralph clutched the ground and was trying, or Piggy clutching the ground was trying to attract Ralph's attention. Ralph moved, bent down, kept a weary eye on Jack. Ralph, remember what we came for, the fire and my specs! And at this, Ralph nodded. He relaxed his fighting muscles, and he stood easily and grounded the butt of the spear. Jack watched them inscrutably through the paint. Ralph glanced up at the pinnacles, then towards the group of savages. Listen, we've come to say this. First, you've got to give Piggy's specs back. If he hasn't got them, he can't see. You guys aren't playing a game here. Our boy can't see. The tribe of painted savages giggled at this, and Ralph's mind faltered. He pushed his hair up, and he gazed at the green and black mass before him, trying to remember what Jack looked like. And then Piggy whispered, and the fire, tell him about the fire. Oh, yes. Also about the fire, I say this. I've been saying it since we dropped in. He held on his spear and pointed at the savages. Your only hope is keeping a signal fire going as long as there's light to see. Then maybe a ship will notice the smoke and come rescue us and take us home. But without that smoke, we've got to wait till some ship comes by accident. We wait years, and we might even wait years until we're old. The shivering, silvery, unreal laughter of the savages sprayed out and echoed away. A gust of rage shook Ralph, and his voice cracked. Don't you understand, you painted fools? Sam, Eric, Piggy, and me, we aren't enough. We tried to keep that fire going, but we couldn't. And then you, all of you guys out playing hunting. He pointed past them to where the trickle of smoke dispersed in the pearly air. Look at that. You call that a signal fire? That's a cooking fire, and that's it. Now you're going to eat, and there's going to be no smoke. Don't you understand? There could be a ship out there right now that's passing us because of your stupidity. He paused, defeated by the silence, and painted an enemy of the group guarding the entry. Jack opened a pink mouth and addressed some Thematic who were between him and the tribe. You two, get back! But no one answered him. The twins, puzzled, looking at each other, while Piggy, reassured by the cessation of violence, stood up carefully. Jack glanced back at Ralph and then at the twins. Grab them! But no one moved, and Jack shouted angrily, I said grab them! The painted group moved around Thematic nervously and unhandedly. Once more, the silvery laughter scattered, and Thematic protested out of the heart of civilization. Oh, I say! Honestly! Their spears were taken from them. Tie him up! Ralph cried out hopelessly against the black and green mask. Jack! Go on, tie him up! Now the painted group felt the otherness of the Thematic, felt power in their own hands. They felled the twins clumsily and excitedly, and Jack was inspired. He knew that Ralph would attempt a rescue, so he struck in a humming circle behind him, and Ralph only parried the blow. Beyond them, the tribe and the twins were a load and a writhing heap. Piggy crouched again, and then the twins lay astonished, and the tribe stood around them. Jack turned to Ralph and spoke between his teeth. See? They'll do what I want. There was a silence again, and the twins laid inexpertly tied up, and the tribe watched Ralph to see what he would do. He numbered them through his fringe, glimpsed the ineffectual smoke. His temper broke, and he screamed at Jack. You're a beast, and a swine, and a bloody thief! At that moment, Ralph charged at Jack. Jack, knowing this was a crisis, charged too, and they met with a jolt, and they both bounced back off one another. Jack swung his fist at Ralph and caught him in the ear, and Ralph hit Jack in the stomach and made him grunt. And then they were facing each other again, panting and furious, but unnerved by each other's ferocity. They became aware of the noise that was the background to this fight and the steady, shrill cheering off the tribe behind them. Piggy's voice penetrated Ralph. Let me speak! He was standing in the dust in the fight as the tribe saw the intention shrill cheer change to a steady booing. Piggy held up the conch, and the booing sagged a little and then came up to his strength. I got the conch! He shouted. I tell you I got the conch! Surprisingly, there was silence, and the tribe was curious to hear what amusing thing Piggy might say. Silence and pause, but in that silence, a curious air noise close by Ralph's head. He gave it half his attention, and there it was again, a faint zoop. Someone was throwing stones at this point. Roger was dropping them, his one still on the lever. Below him, Ralph was a shock of hair, and Piggy a bag of fat. "I've got to say this. You're acting like a crowd of kids." Suddenly, booing rose and died again as Piggy lifted the white magical shell. "Look what I've got, guys! Which is better, to be a pack of painted idiots like you are, or to be sensible like Ralph is?" A great clamor rose from the savages, and Piggy shouted again, "Which is better, to have rules and agree, or to hunt and kill?" Again the clamor, and again there was a zip. Ralph shouted against the noise, "Which is better, law and rescue, or hunting and breaking things up?" Now Jack was yelling too, and Ralph could no longer make himself heard. Jack was back right against the tribe, and there was a solid mass of menace that bristled with spears. The intention of a charge was forming among them, and they were working up to it, and the neck would be swept and clear. Ralph stood facing them, a little to one side, his spear ready. By him stood Piggy, still holding out the talisman, the fragile, shining beauty of the shell. The storm of the sound beat at them, an incantation of hatred. High overhead, Roger, with a sense of delirious abandonment, leaned on his weight of the lever. Ralph heard the great rock before he saw it. He was aware of the jolt in the earth that came to him through the soles of his feet and the breaking sound of stones at the top of the cliff. And then the monstrous red thing bounded across the neck, and he flung himself flat while the tribe shrieked. The rock that was thrown struck Piggy, a glancing blow from chin to knee. The conch exploded into 1,000 white fragments and ceased to exist. Piggy, saying nothing, with no time for even a grunt, traveled through the air sideways from the rock, turned over as he went. The rock bounced twice and was lost in the forest. Piggy fell 40 feet and landed on his back across the square red rock of the sea. His head opened up and stuff began to come out and turned red. Piggy's arms and legs twitched a bit like a pig's after it had been killed. And then the sea breathed again in a long, slow sigh. The water boiled, white and pink over the rocks, and when it went, sucking back again, the body of Piggy was gone into the sea. Suddenly, Jack bounded out of the tribe and began screaming wildly, Do you see? That's what you all get, and I mean that. There isn't a tribe for you anymore. The conch is gone." He ran forward, stooping. "I'm chief now." Viciously, with full intentions, he hurled his spear at Ralph. The point tore the skin and flesh of Ralph's ribs, then sheared off and fell in the water. Ralph stumbled, feeling not pain but panic, and the tribe screaming now that the chief had to advance. Another spear, a bent one that would not fly straight, went past his face and fell from on high where Roger was. The twins lay hidden behind the tribe, and the anonymous devil's faces swarmed across the neck. Ralph turned and ran. A great noise of seagulls rose behind him, and he obeyed an instinct that he did not know he possessed and swerved over the open space so that the spears went wild. He saw the headless body of the sow and jumped in time. Then he was crashing through the foliage and small boughs and was hidden by the forest. The chief stopped by the pig, turned and held up his hands. Back to the fort we go." Presently the tribe turned noisily to the neck where Roger joined them. The chief spoke to him angrily. "Why aren't you on watch?" Roger looked at him gravely. "I just came down to—" The hangman's horror clung around him. The chief said no more to him, but looked down at Thematic. "You got to join the tribe too." "You let me go! And me!" The chief snatched one of the few spears that were left and poked Sam in the ribs. "What do you mean by it, eh?" said the chief fiercely. "What do you mean by coming with spears? What do you mean by not joining my tribe?" The prodding became rhythmic, and Sam yelled in pain. "That's not the way." Roger edged past the chief, only just avoiding pushing him with his shoulder. The yelling ceased, and Thematic lay looking up in quiet terror. Roger advanced upon them as one wielding a nameless authority. Folks, once again, another pretty big death in this chapter. Now, Piggy is dead. A common theme of this story definitely is, I think, the idea that a big theme throughout this entire thing is the idea that when we get rid of rules, when we get rid of a society, how quickly people can turn into this. And I don't know. I want us to think of ourselves. How long would it take us if there was no rules? Would we become like this, like these boys in the story? I would think maybe not to this extreme, but at the same time, I think that is what William Golding is saying here. He's talking about how inherently in all of us, we have this animal instincts in us. And when you get rid of society and you get rid of rules, this could be awakened in all of us. So that's all for today, guys. Goodbye.